Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Barefoot Gen. Now, if you haven't heard of Barefoot Gen was originally a manga series written by Keiji Nakazawa, and it's a semi-autobiographical work discussing aspects of Keiji Nakazawa's life, in particular the fact that he was a survivor of the atomic bomb dropping on Hiroshima. The original manga has been very well received, although it has received some controversy as well, and has been adapted into a variety of media, such as a few live-action films, a live-action TV drama, and of course, some anime films. And this anime film is what I want to discuss today. So let's get started. So what is the story of Barefoot Gen? Barefoot Gen opens up in 1945 Japan, and we are introduced to the Nakaoka family, in particular a boy named Gen. And we see that the family is struggling to survive. Just like so many in wartime Japan, there's a lot of rationing, there's a lot of illness. Understandably, things aren't good. Now, it's interesting to note that there is a lot of air sirens going off as Allied forces go above Hiroshima. But interestingly, in contrast to so many other cities in Japan, which have been bombed into devastation, Hiroshima seems to have escaped the worst of it. And it is pondered by some of the characters why. Why is Hiroshima being spared the fate that so many other Japanese cities are going through? Now, we spent some time getting to know this family. The father, the pregnant mother, the daughter, and primarily the two sons in their struggle for survival. And then the bomb drops. And that's how the story begins. And I have to say that this movie is quite emotionally charged. It doesn't simply drop the bomb at the beginning of the movie. It gives you some time to get to know about these characters, some time to care about these characters. And so when the bomb drops, it really hits you hard. And because of that, this can be quite an emotionally harrowing film. But it's done really well and really gives you a different view of the atomic bombing itself. Now, that's not to say that this movie is perfect. I do have a couple of criticisms directed towards this film. For one, there are some tonal shifts in this movie which can be quite bizarre. In particular, the fact that the lead character, Gen, who is only about 12 years old, responds to some events in the movie surprisingly lightheartedly. It can feel almost inappropriate in a way. I guess it makes sense. The character of Gen is trying to process all of these horrors that are happening all at once around him, and his response is to be somewhat humorous about it. But even so, it can feel quite strange and bizarre. But I have to say that besides that, this is an incredible film, and one that I would definitely recommend that people check out, whether you be fans of anime, whether you be fans of movies about World War II, or whether you are simply into tragic films. Now, with regards to the animation for this film was produced by Madhouse. If you haven't heard of Madhouse, you will know them for several other works they have done, such as Death Note, such as Hunter x Hunter, such as the Satoshi Kon movies, and a variety of other works. They're a very large animation studio. And this film was produced in 1983, and it's a very interesting movie visually, because I quite often associate Madhouse films with a kind of a more realistic art style. And this film kind of feels like a blend of the two, of the stylization of typical anime with some of the more realistic aspects of Madhouse's style and animation. And overall, I think the animation itself is actually quite good. You really get a sense of the horror happening in this film. And there's enough beauty as well in this film, particularly at the beginning, that when the horror comes in, that it really hits you hard. The animation of the characters is pretty fluid, and of course, people will point out the atomic bomb scene itself as incredibly animated. Overall, I think the animation of this film is quite well done. I have to give kudos to Madhouse and all the other animation studios that were involved in animating this film for making a film that actually stands up quite well. With regards to the music of this film is again very interesting to analyze. Quite jovial at the beginning, with just a kind of a 12-year-old boy and his family trying to make their way through life. Once the actual horror begins, we get the music that backs up the horror. So overall, I think the music complements this movie quite well in both letting down your guard at the beginning of this film and then delivering a very severe blow later on. With regards to the voice cast, now it's worth noting that the edition that I have only has a Japanese dub. There is an English dub that was produced for this film, and I will discuss that later on, but for the moment I'm going to discuss the Japanese dub. And the Japanese dub itself is quite well done. Admittedly, Gen is voiced by an actual 12-year-old, and I don't know what it is about it, but he plays the 12-year-old a bit too well. There are some deliveries that kind of grate on my head, and just from a 12-year-old perspective, you know, the tone of the 12-year-old voice. It is also excellent at conveying the innocence of the boy, and the way that he is trying to respond to this disaster. It is, from that perspective, very well done. I just admit that myself, I found the voice slightly grating, but that's not a fault of his performance, just a fault of the tone of voice that he happened to have. A lot of the other voices in this movie are particularly well done, although it is worth noting that the American bombers that dropped the atomic bomb are voiced in English, and their English is quite stilted.
Fixed on target. Release bomb.
Roger. Releasing bomb.
It seems unlikely that they were native English speakers, but nonetheless I thought that was quite a funny little aspect of the dub. But overall it was very well done. Now, with regards to how this was released, so the edition that I have is the edition that was released in the UK and Ireland by Optimum, which I believe has since become Studio Canal. And it has very few extras, although it is worth noting that it does contain the second film as well, Barefoot Gen 2. Which, as you might imagine, is an excellent addition. I'll discuss Barefoot Gen 2 more in the future. But beyond that, there isn't too much else to this package. It's pretty alright. Now, Discotheque Media in America have released this on DVD and Blu-ray. The Blu-ray edition was not available over here. This was only released on DVD. And unlike this edition, it actually has an English dub that was produced for the film back in, I believe it was the 1990s. Now, I've never seen the English dub. I can't comment on the quality of the English dub, but just having the English dub makes the Discotheque Media release a more fuller package. And so, as you might imagine, I would recommend that you pick up Discotheque Media's release of Barefoot Gen over the UK edition. So overall, what are my thoughts on Barefoot Gen? It is a surprisingly powerful film, and it really gives you a greater idea of the suffering that people went through after the dropping of the atomic bomb. And because of that, since that viewpoint is actually not very well known over here, I would definitely recommend checking out this film to the vast majority of people. Only people who are squeamish, there is some quite horrifying scenes in this film, should avoid this film. But besides that, I would definitely recommend this film. This is a very powerful work of anime, and I think anyone who's interested in anime as a storytelling medium, as well as those interested in World War II and the suffering that happened during World War II, should check out this film. I think it's a very important film. So that was my review of Barefoot Gen. Hopefully you enjoyed this review and you found it very informative. Let me know if you've seen this film before, what your thoughts were on it. If you've read the manga, if the manga is any different to the film. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.